Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Camden County, Missouri. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know what places and what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the rolling hills of the Ozarks, where the wind whispers secrets through ancient trees, the name Blackwood once inspired both reverence and dread. And though the calendar may have moved forward, the shadow they cast remains frozen in time, a dark stain on the history of a place that has tried desperately to forget. This is their story. Martha and Ruth Blackwood arrived in Camden County in the harsh winter of 1885. No one quite remembered where they came from. Some said Kentucky, others Virginia. The sisters kept to themselves, purchasing a modest two-story farmhouse on the outskirts of what would later become Camdenton. The property sat adjacent to Hazel Creek, its waters black and still during winter months. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, a distance that suited the sisters just fine. Martha was the elder by 4 years, tall and severe, with graying hair she wore in a tight bun. Ruth, softer spoken with dark auburn hair, was the one who ventured into town for supplies. Their arrival coincided with the county's desperate need for skilled midwives. The previous midwife, Mrs. Eleanor Tilton, had died the previous autumn, leaving expectant mothers without assistance during the dangerous process of childbirth. Word of the sisters' skill spread quickly after Martha successfully delivered Mrs. Whitaker's baby, a complicated breech birth that had the entire community preparing for tragedy. When both mother and child survived without complication, the Blackwood sisters were instantly elevated to near-revered status. In an era where childbirth often meant death, their abilities seemed miraculous. Within 6 months, they had attended 15 births across the county. Families would send word when labor began, and the sisters would arrive with their black leather medical bag filled with herbs, tinctures, and instruments of their trade. They never accepted payment beyond food and basic supplies. God's work needs no coin, Martha would say, though her eyes never reflected the warmth of her words. Hattie Wilkins, one of the few surviving residents who remembered the sisters, gave an interview to the Camden County Gazette in 1952 when she was 93 years old. "I was just a girl then," she recalled, "but I remember the first time I saw them. It was at the general store. Martha stood tall and straight, never looking directly at anyone. Ruth would smile and nod politely. There was something about them, the way other folks gave them space without seeming to realize they were doing it, like animals sensing something dangerous." What struck many in the community was the sisters' extensive knowledge of herbal remedies. According to Dr. Harper's records, they successfully treated ailments that had confounded his medical training. The elder Blackwood provided Mrs. Summers with a tincture that cleared her consumption when I had given her mere weeks to live, he wrote in his medical journal. Samuel Johnson, whose property adjoined the Blackwood land, later testified to Sheriff Reed that they grew plants I've never seen before or since, flowers that bloomed only at night, herbs with leaves that seemed to shift color, depending on who was looking at them. He claimed to have once seen Ruth harvesting these plants under the full moon, completely naked, though this account was dismissed by Reed as the fanciful imagination of a man known to enjoy his whiskey. Sheriff Thomas, Reed noted in his personal journal, found decades later in the county records office, "The Blackwood women have proven themselves invaluable to our community, though there is something unsettling about the elder one. When pressed for the ingredients, she merely smiled and said it was a family recipe passed down through generations." The sisters' farmhouse soon became known for the unusual garden they cultivated behind it. She never smiles, even when delivering good news. By autumn of 1886, the sisters had helped bring 27 babies into the world. Every mother survived, a miracle by the standards of the time. Every child was born healthy and strong. Yet, by winter's end, 3 of those infants would be dead. Local physician Dr. William Harper recorded his suspicions in letters to a colleague in St. Louis. I can find no medical explanation for these deaths. The children simply waste away, refusing to nurse, growing weaker until they slip from this world. The mothers report nightmares before each decline begins, dreams of a woman standing over the cradle in darkness. I hesitate to give credence to superstition, but I confess I am troubled. The first death, that of infant Emma Collins, was attributed to winter croup. The second, Timothy Grant, to an unspecified fever. By the third, Rebecca Wilson, whispers began circulating through the community. Martha and Ruth attended each funeral, standing at the back of the congregation, heads bowed. Ruth would weep openly. Martha remained stoic, her eyes fixed on the tiny coffins. Abigail Wilson, mother of the third deceased child, later confided to Reverend Miller a detail she had initially kept to herself. The night before Rebecca fell ill, I dreamed of Martha Blackwood standing over her cradle. She wasn't alone. There was a shadow behind her, a woman's shape, but with no features I could discern. In my dream, Martha pointed to my baby and said to this shadow, "This one, she carries the mark." When I woke, Rebecca was already feverish. 3 days later, she was gone. Similar accounts began to emerge from other mothers. Josephine Grant claimed that 2 nights before her son Timothy died, she had found one of Martha's hairpins in his cradle, though the woman had not been in their home since the birth weeks earlier. Catherine Collins reported finding strange markings drawn in ash on her doorstep the morning her daughter Emma first showed signs of illness. In December 1886, Mary and Joseph Peterson became parents to twins, the first multiple birth the Blackwood sisters had attended. According to Mrs. Peterson's later testimony to Reverend James Miller, documented in the church record of 1887, Martha's demeanor changed upon realizing there were 2 babies. She grew pale and still, Mrs. Peterson recalled. She whispered something to her sister that I couldn't hear. Ruth began to tremble. When the second baby emerged, Martha held them both, one in each arm, and stared at them with such intensity I feared for their souls. Mrs. Peterson later elaborated in her private correspondence with her sister in Springfield, discovered in 1965 by historian Margaret Wilson. What I did not tell the Reverend for fear of being thought mad was what Martha said when she held my babies. She looked from one to the other and whispered, "One vessel cannot hold 2 souls. The doorway becomes unstable." Ruth began to weep then, begging her sister to leave these be. Martha silenced her with a look and proceeded with the birthing as if nothing unusual had occurred. Both twins died within a week. The official cause recorded failure to thrive. By spring of 1887, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Children delivered by the Blackwood sisters rarely lived to see their first birthday. Those who survived infancy never reached adulthood. Sheriff Reed began keeping a private ledger, correlating births attended by the sisters with subsequent deaths. The pattern was undeniable, though no evidence of foul play could be found. The deaths appeared natural, if unnaturally consistent. In his notes for March 1887, Reed wrote, "I have examined each case meticulously. The deaths occur weeks or months after the Blackwoods' involvement with the birth. No poison or violence is evident. The children simply fade, as if something essential was taken from them at birth, something beyond medical understanding. I find myself considering explanations I would have dismissed as nonsense a year ago." Dr. Harper, meanwhile, conducted his own investigation. In a letter to his colleague Dr. James Morgan of St. Louis University Medical School, dated April 3, 1887, he wrote, "I have examined samples of the herbal teas the Blackwood women administer to mothers during labor. They contain common ingredients, red raspberry leaf, chamomile, nettle, nothing that could explain the subsequent deaths of these infants. Yet I cannot shake the feeling that something is being done during these births, something beyond my perception or understanding." In April 1887, Elizabeth Shaw gave birth to a healthy boy with the Blackwoods in attendance. 3 days later, she woke in the night, to find Martha standing over her son's cradle. No doors or windows had been opened. When questioned the next day, Martha denied being there. The infant died 2 days later. Mrs. Shaw's account, given to Sheriff Reed and recorded in his official report, added a detail that chilled even the skeptical lawman. When I saw her standing there, she was not alone. Behind her was a figure, a woman, I thought at first, but something was wrong about the shape of it. It seemed to shift and change as I watched. Martha was speaking to it in words I couldn't understand. When I cried out, both she and the shape vanished, not ran away or hid, but vanished before my eyes. I know how this sounds, Sheriff. I know you'll think me hysterical with grief, but I swear on my baby's grave, this is what I saw. The community's trust began to fracture. Families with young children avoided the sisters. Pregnant women began traveling to neighboring counties rather than call upon them. Yet no one dared accuse them directly. The fear of losing access to skilled midwives during a medical emergency outweighed growing suspicions. The Reverend Miller documented conversations with worried parishioners in his private diary. They speak of a curse that any child touched by the Blackwood women is marked for death. I counsel against such superstitious thinking, yet I cannot explain the pattern that emerges. 27 births, 17 deaths already, the remainder sickly and failing. What darkness walks among us? Miller's diary contained another entry, dated May 15, 1887, that he shared with no one during his lifetime. I dreamed last night of standing before a great door. On our side, what I understood to be the world of the living, stood Martha Blackwood, holding the hand of a small child. On the other side was darkness, but not empty darkness. Something waited there, many somethings, moving just beyond my sight. Martha spoke to them. The exchange continues as agreed. One passes through, another returns. Then she urged the child forward through the door, and as it passed the threshold, something else stepped through in the opposite direction. Something wearing the shape of a child, but not a child at all. I woke drenched in sweat, the words echoing, "The exchange continues." In summer 1887, the sisters' isolated farmhouse became the focus of nighttime scrutiny. Young men from town would hide in the surrounding woods watching for signs of witchcraft or other malevolence. They reported lantern light moving between rooms at odd hours, strange sounds carried on the night air, sounds one witness described as a woman weeping, but not in a human way. Thomas Granger, one of these nighttime observers, later signed an affidavit describing what he claimed to have seen. It was just past midnight, the moon full overhead. A light appeared in the woods behind the Blackwood house. Not a lantern, nothing that cast a normal glow, but a cold blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The sisters emerged from the back door and walked toward it. As they approached, I saw what appeared to be a doorway standing in the middle of the clearing, a doorway with no wall around it, just a rectangle of deeper darkness. Martha Blackwood approached it, held out her hands, and began to speak in a language I've never heard. From this doorway came voices, children's voices, dozens of them, calling out names I couldn't make out. Ruth fell to her knees, covering her ears. Martha continued speaking until the voices fell silent. Then she turned to Ruth and said, clear enough for me to hear, "The bargain holds, 33 souls to keep the doorway balanced. We have 16 more to go." Granger's account was dismissed by most as the product of moonshine and superstition. Sheriff Reed, however, noted in his private journal that Granger was not known as a fanciful man, nor one given to excessive drink. His fear appeared genuine. The county records contain a curious notation from this period, a complaint filed by Martha Blackwood against trespassers on her property. Sheriff Reed's response, documented in the margin, informed Miss Blackwood that public concerns warrant observation, suggested she consider relocating if this arrangement proves unsatisfactory. Reed later confided to Dr. Harper, as recorded in the physician's journal, "I looked directly into that woman's eyes when I suggested she leave the county. I have faced down armed criminals with less fear than I felt in that moment." She did not threaten or raise her voice. She simply said, "Our work here is not finished. The balance must be maintained." I do not know what she meant, but I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. On October 31st, 1887, Sarah Miller, the Reverend's 16-year-old daughter, went into premature labor. With no time to seek help elsewhere, the Reverend reluctantly sent for the Blackwood sisters. What happened that night would be recorded in multiple sources: the Reverend's diary, Sheriff Reed's official report, and in fragments of Ruth Blackwood's personal journal discovered decades later beneath a floorboard in the abandoned farmhouse. The Reverend wrote, "They arrived as the moon reached its apex. Martha examined Sarah immediately, her face grave. 'The baby is turned wrong,' she said. 'We must work quickly.' Ruth prepared her sister's instruments, while Martha mixed herbs in a tea and made Sarah drink. Within minutes, my daughter fell into a deep sleep, though her labor continued." He continued, "I heard them speaking in low voices in a language that sounded like no European tongue I know. When I asked what they were saying, Martha replied they were praying. But these were no prayers to any god I serve. The room grew cold despite the fire in the grate. Sarah moaned in her unnatural sleep. And then, I hesitate to record this for fear of my own sanity, I saw darkness gather at the foot of the bed, a darkness deeper than the absence of light. It had shape and substance. It waited." Sheriff Reed's report, filed 3 days later, stated, "Reverend Miller claims he was instructed to wait downstairs. He reports hearing strange incantations from his daughter's room, not prayer, not in any language of God," he insisted. When he attempted to enter the room, he found the door impossible to open, though it had no lock. The birth took approximately 2 hours, after which Martha Blackwood emerged with the infant, a girl healthy and crying lustily. The fragment from Ruth's journal provides the most disturbing account. M. performed the ritual as Mother taught us. The child is marked now, like all the others. I asked again why we must do this thing. M. reminded me of our purpose. Balance must be maintained. One life given to us means another must return. But I grow weary of this burden. The mother's cries haunt my dreams, the tiny faces, so many tiny faces in the darkness. Another fragment, partially damaged but still legible, elaborated. M. says the door between worlds grows unstable. Too many have passed through without proper exchange. Our mother managed only 17 exchanges before they drove her from Virginia. We have marked 33 now. M. says we need 33 exactly, a number of power. Only then will the doorway stabilize. Only then can we rest. But I wonder, will we ever be free of their voices? Do the returned ones remember what they were before? Sarah Miller's daughter lived exactly 1 year. On her first birthday, she developed a high fever and died before morning. She was the 33rd child delivered by the Blackwoods, the 33rd to die. Reverend Miller, in his grief, broke his silence about what he had witnessed the night of his granddaughter's birth. In a sermon that shocked his congregation, he spoke openly of dark forces at work in their community. "I have seen the doorway," he told his parishioners. "I have heard the voices from beyond it. The Blackwood women are not midwives. They are gatekeepers to something terrible. They do not bring life into this world. They mark it for return to another." The church elders, concerned for Miller's mental state, suggested he take a leave of absence. He refused, becoming increasingly vehement in his accusations. According to church records, attendance dropped sharply in the weeks following what became known as the Doorway Sermon. In November 1887, a town meeting was held at the church. The topic, according to the town record, the Blackwood matter. No formal accusations were made, but the community agreed to send expectant mothers to Springfield for delivery when possible. The sisters were not to be persecuted, merely avoided. Sheriff Reed, presiding over the meeting, advised caution. "We have suspicions, but no proof of wrongdoing. The deaths, while tragic, have no clear cause that could be presented in any court. I urge restraint and vigilance, not hasty action that could leave us without midwifery services entirely." Dr. Harper supported this position, noting, "We must remember that childbirth remains dangerous. Without skilled attendants, we risk losing both mothers and infants. Let us be watchful, but not reckless. Only Reverend Miller dissented, pounding his fist on the pulpit. "You speak of practical concerns while evil walks among us. My granddaughter is dead. 32 others lie in tiny graves. How many more children must we sacrifice before you act?" His outburst was met with uncomfortable silence. After the meeting, several parishioners approached the church elders about finding a replacement for Miller, whose grief, they felt, had unbalanced his mind. Reverend Miller recorded in his diary, "Fear has taken hold here, whether justified or mere superstition, I cannot say with certainty, but 33 children are dead. 33 families shattered. Something must be done, though I know not what." A subsequent entry, dated December 1, 1887, revealed Miller's deteriorating mental state. "I see them now, the children who died. They come to me in dreams, standing in a circle around a door of darkness. They speak with one voice. We were not meant for your world. We were merely vessels, prepared and returned. But something comes through when we go back, something wearing our faces, learning to be human. I wake screaming, and Sarah begs me to seek help. But who can help us now? Who would believe what I have seen?" The winter of 1887 to 1888 passed quietly. The sisters remained in their farmhouse, increasingly isolated. Few ventured to their door. Then, in February 1888, Emma Blackwell, a young widow living alone on the northern edge of the county, went into labor during a severe snowstorm. With no way to reach Springfield and no neighbors nearby, she sent her only servant to fetch the Blackwood sisters. They arrived, according to the servant's later testimony, as if they had been waiting for the call, their bag already packed, their horses already saddled despite the storm. What happened in that isolated cabin would become the turning point in the dark legend of the Midwife sisters. According to the servant's account, preserved in Sheriff Reed's official report, Miss Martha examined Mrs. Blackwell and announced she was carrying twins. At this news, Mrs. Blackwell became greatly distressed, having heard the rumors about twin births attended by the sisters. She begged them to leave, saying she would rather die than have them touch her babies. Miss Martha grew very still. She told Mrs. Blackwell it was too late. The babies were coming, and without help, all 3 would perish. The servant, Mary Putnam, later expanded on her account in a private letter to her sister, discovered in 1963 by Wilson. "What I did not tell the sheriff was the strange way Miss Martha looked when she felt the second baby. It was not surprise. It was recognition. She said, 'Twins again. The doorway seeks balance of its own accord.' Miss Ruth turned white as a sheet and whispered, 'No more, Martha, please, no more.' But Martha silenced her and proceeded with the birthing preparations. The labor was difficult and lasted through the night. Near dawn, the first twin, a boy, was born. Minutes later, the second, also a boy, followed. Both appeared healthy. The servant reported that Martha took the infants to wash them while Ruth attended to the exhausted mother. What happened next would be recounted differently, depending on the source. The servant claimed she heard a strange chanting from the adjoining room where Martha had taken the babies. When she peered through the partially open door, she saw Martha holding both infants over a basin of water, whispering words in an unknown language. Terrified, she ran to fetch Mrs. Blackwell's hunting rifle. Martha's eventual testimony to Sheriff Reed offered a different account. "I was washing the infants as is proper procedure. The servant girl burst in with a rifle, raving about witchcraft and curses. In her hysteria, she fired the weapon. The bullet struck my sister, Ruth, who had entered behind her." Mary Putnam's letter to her sister gave yet another version. "I saw her standing over those babies, drawing symbols on their foreheads with some dark substance. Behind her, God help me for saying this, was a doorway where no door should be, a rectangle of darkness floating in the middle of the room. Something was moving in that darkness, reaching toward our world. I heard children's voices coming from it, crying out in pain or fear. I ran for the rifle. When I returned, Ruth had entered the room and was begging her sister to stop. 'The balance is complete,' she was saying. 'We have our 33. Let these 2 live.' Martha turned to her with such coldness and said, 'The door requires more now. It always requires more.' That's when I fired. I aimed for Martha, but Ruth moved between us at the last moment. The bullet took her in the chest. The doorway vanished as she fell. Whatever the truth, the outcome was documented in multiple sources. Ruth Blackwood died that morning from a gunshot wound to the chest. Martha was taken into custody by Sheriff Reed, who had been summoned by a neighbor who heard the shot. The twins survived. Emma Blackwell, however, died 3 days later from childbed fever, the first maternal death associated with the Blackwood sisters. During her incarceration awaiting trial, Martha Blackwood maintained her innocence regarding any wrongdoing with the children she had delivered. The formal charge was practicing medicine without proper licensing. A tenuous case at best, in a time and place where midwifery was largely unregulated. Sheriff Reed's notes from his interrogations reveal Martha's unsettling composure. She sits perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, answering questions directly, but volunteering nothing. When asked about the infant deaths, she simply says, "Some souls are not meant for this world. They return to where they belong." When pressed on what this means, she smiles faintly and remains silent. What followed was documented in court records discovered in the county archive in 1962. Martha Blackwood was released after 2 weeks due to lack of evidence and community pressure from families who still required midwifery services despite their fears. Judge William Simmons, who presided over the hearing, wrote in his private correspondence to a colleague in Jefferson City, "The woman disturbs me profoundly. Throughout the proceedings, she maintained a serenity that bordered on the unnatural. When I announced her release, she neither smiled nor showed relief. She simply nodded, as if the outcome had been predetermined. As she left my courtroom, she paused beside me and whispered, 'The doorway remains open, but balanced now. 33 returned, 33 received. The exchange is complete.' I do not know what she meant, but I felt a chill that has not left me since." Upon her release, Martha returned to the farmhouse alone. According to local accounts, she became increasingly reclusive, emerging only when called to a birth, calls that grew increasingly rare as rumors continued to spread. The Blackwell twins, meanwhile, thrived under the care of their maternal grandmother, the first children delivered by the Blackwood sisters to show no signs of decline. Their survival was attributed by many to Ruth's death, breaking whatever curse or evil practice the sisters had employed. Reverend Miller, however, proposed a different explanation in his final sermon before being removed from his position by the church elders. The bargain is complete. 33 souls returned, 33 received. The Blackwell twins live because the exchange no longer requires deaths. Whatever came through the doorway is here now, walking among us, wearing human form, learning to be human. The congregation's uncomfortable silence was broken only by Mrs. Miller leading her husband from the pulpit. He did not resist. The following week, he was committed to the state asylum in St. Louis, where he remained until his death in 1892. His final writings, preserved by his wife but not made public until Wilson's research in the 1960s, contained increasingly disturbed references to replacement children and the ones who came through the door. In June 1888, Martha Blackwood attended her final birth, that of Clara Jenkins's daughter. 3 days later, Martha was found dead in her farmhouse. The official cause, as recorded by Dr. Harper, natural causes, likely heart failure. Sheriff Reed's private notes told a different story. Found Miss Blackwood seated at her table, a journal open before her, pen still in hand. No signs of struggle or distress. The final entry reads, "Ruth was right. The balance has been restored. My work is finished." Beneath the floorboards of the bedroom, we discovered 33 tiny objects wrapped in cloth. Locks of hair, it appears, one from each deceased child. What purpose these served, I hesitate to speculate. Reed continued, "Most disturbing was what we found in the cellar. A door had been drawn on the earth floor in what appeared to be charcoal mixed with some red substance. Blood, I fear. Around this door were arranged 33 small handprints, also in this mixture. The prints were too small to be those of an adult, yet there were no children in the house. The impression given was that tiny hands had reached through from the other side of this drawn doorway, leaving their marks in our world. The farmhouse was boarded up, its contents cataloged and stored in the county records office. The journal mentioned in Reed's notes was never officially entered into evidence. Its whereabouts remained unknown until 1962, when historian Margaret Wilson discovered it while researching the county's medical history. The journal, extensively damaged by moisture and time, contained fragmentary explanations of the sisters' practices. According to Wilson's analysis, published in the Journal of Ozark History, 1964, the Blackwood sisters appeared to adhere to a belief system that required balance between worlds. Each birth represented a soul entering from the other side. Without proper ritual and eventual return, the natural order would collapse. The sisters saw themselves not as harbingers of death, but as guardians of cosmic equilibrium. One legible passage from Martha's journal elaborated, "Mother taught us that the doorway has existed since time began. Some call it the veil between worlds, others the threshold of life and death. All misunderstand. It is not death that waits on the other side. It is something older than death, something that seeks entry to our world. The ancient pact was made by our ancestors. For each soul that comes through to be born, another must return. When this exchange is balanced, the doorway remains stable. When it falls out of balance, terrible things slip through, things wearing human form but empty inside, hungry for what they cannot have." Another passage, "The 33 are special, chosen for their sensitivity to the doorway. They can see beyond it even as infants. This makes them perfect vessels for the exchange. Their souls return, carrying knowledge of our world to the other side. And in exchange we receive gifts, knowledge, power, abilities beyond ordinary humans. The replacement children born after the exchange carry traces of what came through when the 33 returned. This is the bargain. This is the balance." More disturbing were entries suggesting their mother, referenced only as "she who taught us," had practiced similar rituals in Virginia before being driven out. The family had apparently moved throughout the eastern United States, practicing their dark midwifery in multiple communities before settling in Missouri. A particularly chilling entry, dated shortly after Ruth's death, read, "R. never understood the necessity of our work. She saw only the grief of mothers, heard only the cries of infants. She could not comprehend the greater purpose, that without the exchange, the doorway would break open entirely. What comes through in measured, controlled exchange is nothing compared to what would flood through an unbalanced door. Humanity has been protected by my lineage for generations. The price is high, but the alternative unthinkable." The final pages of the journal, partially legible, suggested Ruth had grown increasingly troubled by their practices. Martha wrote, "R questions our purpose. She weeps for the little ones. She does not understand that they were never meant for this world, merely visitors passing through. We do not cause their deaths. We merely facilitate their return. Without us, the doorway would remain open. Worse things would come through." And the final entry, written the day before Martha was found dead. "The exchange is complete. 33 returned, 33 received. The doorway is balanced for this generation. Those who came through will live among humans, learning, observing, preparing for the next opening. I go now to join Ruth and Mother in watching from the other side. The next keeper of the door will emerge when the time comes again. The spiral turns. The balance continues." The Blackwell twins, the last birth attended by both sisters, lived to adulthood. Both served in World War I and returned to Camden County afterward. Neither married or had children. According to local accounts, they were quiet, respected members of the community, though they kept largely to themselves. County records indicate that Joseph Blackwell became a school teacher, while his brother Thomas established a successful medical practice. Both were noted for their exceptional abilities, Joseph for his seemingly photographic memory and facility with languages, Thomas for diagnostic skills that bordered on the uncanny. Locals remarked that Thomas often knew what was wrong with a patient before they described their symptoms. In 1937, the younger twin, Joseph Blackwell, commissioned a small stone marker at the site of the Blackwood farmhouse, which had collapsed years earlier. The inscription read simply, "May they find peace." Whether this referred to the sisters or their many victims remains unclear. Dr. Thomas Blackwell's journals, donated to the County Historical Society after his death in 1956, contained occasional references to dreams of the doorway and voices from the other side. In one entry, dated 1942, he wrote, "Joseph and I discussed our unusual connection today, how we sometimes know each other's thoughts, how we dream the same dreams on the same nights. He asked if I remembered being on the other side of the door before our birth. I said I did not. He looked at me strangely and said, 'I do. I remember everything, and they are still waiting to come through again.'" The land was eventually incorporated into what would become the Lake of the Ozarks State Park. The stone marker disappeared during development, its location forgotten until Wilson's research identified the approximate area. In 1962, during construction of a new Park Service road, workers uncovered a small underground chamber near the former farmhouse site. Inside were 33 small cloth bundles arranged in a circle, the same bundles referenced in Sheriff Reed's notes, but thought to have been destroyed. Park officials, unfamiliar with the local history, discarded the items as old trash. Wilson, upon learning of the discovery months later, attempted to recover them without success. One worker, however, kept a single bundle as a curiosity. In 1965, he showed it to Wilson during her research. She described it in her notes: a small square of black cloth sewn shut with red thread. When held, it produces an unusual sensation, a vibration or pulse, as if something inside is still alive. The worker reports experiencing vivid dreams since taking it, dreams of a door standing open in darkness, and children's voices calling him to come through. The final twist in the macabre story of the Midwife sisters came in 1965, when descendants of families affected by the so-called Blackwood curse were contacted for Wilson's follow-up research. A disturbing pattern emerged. Every family that had lost a child delivered by the Blackwoods subsequently had another child, often within a year, who demonstrated unusual talents or abilities. These replacement children, as Wilson termed them, showed heightened intuition, remarkable intellectual gifts, or artistic abilities far beyond their peers. Many reported vivid dreams of another place throughout childhood. Several became prominent in their fields: doctors, artists, inventors, whose work changed their respective industries. Wilson documented interviews with 12 descendants of these replacement children. All described similar experiences, unusual abilities manifesting in early childhood, recurring dreams of a doorway or threshold, and an inexplicable sense of being different from other humans. One subject, Dr. Eleanor Richmond, a renowned neurologist, told Wilson, "I've always known I didn't belong here, not fully. Part of me remembers somewhere else, a place beyond normal human perception. The knowledge I've contributed to medical science doesn't feel like discovery to me, it feels like remembering." Wilson's research was abruptly discontinued in 1968 when funding was withdrawn. Her notes and partial manuscript were archived at the University of Missouri but never published. The collection was damaged in a storage facility flood in 1972, leaving only fragments of her conclusions. Those fragments, however, hint at a theory more unsettling than mere coincidence. The pattern suggests not random tragedy, but selection. The Blackwood sisters appear to have been identifying specific children, those with particular sensitivity to what they called the other side. Their deaths facilitated something, perhaps a transfer or exchange. The children born afterward carried something with them: knowledge, abilities, awareness, that should not exist in those so young. What were the sisters actually doing in those birthing rooms? What were they really midwifing into this world? A final note written shortly before her funding was cut: "I begin to wonder if the story I'm uncovering is meant to remain hidden. 3 times now I've arrived to interview subjects who have suddenly canceled without explanation. My office at the university was broken into, though nothing was taken except my notes on the replacement children. Last night I dreamed of Martha Blackwood standing at the foot of my bed, warning me away from the doorway. Some knowledge, she told me, belongs only to those who keep the balance. I woke to find my bedroom door standing open, though I distinctly remember closing it before sleeping. Following the discontinuation of Wilson's research in 1968 and the subsequent damage to her archives in 1972, the story of the Blackwood sisters might have faded entirely from history were it not for a curious series of events beginning in 1985, nearly a century after their arrival in Camden County. Between 1985 and 1987, Camden County experienced a statistical anomaly, a 300% increase in twin births. According to hospital records, 27 sets of twins were born during this 2-year period, an unprecedented number for a rural county of its size. More striking still, all 27 sets of twins were attended by the same midwife, a woman named Eleanor Black, who had recently established a practice in the area. Local historian James Holloway, familiar with Wilson's earlier research, noted the coincidence and began investigating Eleanor Black's background. What he discovered was documented in a series of articles published in the Camden County Gazette in early 1988. Black had no verifiable medical credentials. Her documentation appeared authentic but proved impossible to verify through the institution she claimed had certified her. More disturbing, Holloway could find no record of her existence prior to her arrival in Camden County. Holloway's investigation uncovered another unsettling detail. Eleanor Black's physical appearance, based on descriptions from her patients and a single photograph published in a local newspaper, bore a striking resemblance to Ruth Blackwood, not Martha. The photograph, when compared to the sole surviving daguerreotype of the Blackwood sisters from the 1880s, showed an uncanny similarity in facial structure and features, though Holloway acknowledged this could be coincidental. One patient, Sarah Henderson, reported a strange incident during her twins' delivery in 1986. Ms. Black was always professional, but there was something about her that made me uneasy. During labor, she gave me a tea that tasted bitter and herbal. My memories of the actual birth are foggy, but I distinctly recall her whispering to my babies as she held them, something about the doorway and the balance. When I asked her later what she meant, she smiled and said, "I must have been hallucinating from the pain." Before Holloway could pursue his investigation further, Eleanor Black disappeared. Her rented home was found empty, with no forwarding address provided. The timing of her disappearance coincided precisely with the 100th anniversary of Martha Blackwood's death. When authorities searched Black's abandoned residence, they found little of note, except, according to unofficial reports, a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards containing 33 small cloth bundles, identical to those discovered at the original Blackwood farmhouse site in 1962. The official police report made no mention of these bundles. When Holloway inquired about the discrepancy, Sheriff Michael Davis told him, "Some things are better left unreported. Some things should stay buried." Davis refused to elaborate further. What became of the 27 sets of twins delivered by Eleanor Black? According to Holloway's follow-up research conducted in the 1990s, all 54 children were healthy and developing normally, in fact, exceptionally. Intelligence testing conducted through the local school system revealed that these children consistently scored in the highest percentiles. Many demonstrated unusual talents in music, mathematics, or artistic expression. None showed any signs of the Blackwood curse that had claimed so many lives a century earlier. More unusual still, according to teachers' reports collected by Holloway, these children often exhibited synchronized behavior, even when separated, knowing what the other was thinking or feeling across distances, completing each other's sentences, experiencing the same dreams on the same nights. One set of twins reportedly spoke to each other in a language no one else could understand, a language that linguistic experts who examined recordings described as structurally unlike any known human tongue. Holloway proposed a theory in his final article on the subject, published in 1995. If we accept the premise of Wilson's research that the Blackwood sisters were engaged in some form of ritual aimed at transferring something from one child to another yet to be born, then the pattern we see with these modern twins suggests an evolution of that practice. Rather than sacrificing one child to benefit another yet to come, perhaps this modern practitioner has found a way to split whatever essence is being manipulated between twins, allowing both to survive while each carries half of whatever power or knowledge or ability is being transferred. He continued, "The question remains, who or what is Eleanor Black, a descendant of the original Blackwoods carrying on their tradition? A practitioner of the same obscure arts who recognized the significance of Camden County, or something more disturbing, a return of Ruth Blackwood herself, continuing work begun a century ago?" Holloway's theory gained little traction in academic circles, dismissed as speculative at best, pseudoscientific at worst. His research was largely forgotten until 2010, when Dr. Elaine Morris of the University of Missouri Department of Anthropology began studying what she termed statistical clusters of exceptional individuals throughout the Ozark region. Morris' research identified multiple communities throughout Missouri, Arkansas, and Kentucky that had produced statistically improbable numbers of exceptionally gifted individuals within specific generational cohorts. In each case, she found a correlation to periods of unusually high twin birth rates and the presence of a midwife or birthing attendant who had arrived in the community shortly before the statistical anomaly began and departed soon after. In her 2014 paper, Genetic Exceptionalism in Isolated Rural Communities, The Midwife Connection, Morris carefully avoided any speculation about supernatural elements, focusing instead on the possibility that certain midwives might have employed unrecorded techniques or folk medicines that somehow affected fetal development in ways beneficial to cognitive function. Her research assistant, Michael Chen, conducted interviews with several of the now adult twins born during the 1985-1987 cluster in Camden County. His notes, included as an appendix to Morris's paper, contained several disturbing accounts. One subject, Catherine Wells, told Chen, "My twin brother and I have always known we're different. We can sense each other's thoughts, feel each other's pain across distances. But there's something else. We both dream about the same doorway, a rectangular darkness that stands between worlds. Sometimes, in the dreams, we see our other selves on the other side, not our reflections, but the parts of us that stayed behind when we came through." Another subject, David Reynolds, reported, "My sister and I both have memories we can't explain, knowledge of things we couldn't possibly know, languages we've never studied but understand, scientific concepts we grasped intuitively as children. When we were 10, we built a working model of a device that our physics teacher said shouldn't be possible, according to conventional understanding. We just knew how it worked. It's like we brought something with us when we were born, something from somewhere else." However, in private correspondence with colleagues, recently made public following her retirement in 2020, Morris acknowledged the more disturbing implications of her research. "There is a pattern here that defies conventional explanation. These statistical clusters of exceptional births follow the movement of specific practitioners across geography and time in ways that cannot be coincidental. Whatever these women are doing, it appears to be part of a tradition passed down through generations, one that has evolved from the crude practices of the 19th century to something more refined but no less unsettling in its implications. Are we seeing evidence of some form of human cognitive enhancement achieved through means outside established medical practice? And if so, to what end is this being done, and under whose direction?" In 2018, a graduate student in Morris's department, Jessica Chen, uncovered yet another layer to the mystery while researching birth records across the Midwest. She discovered that many of the midwives identified in Morris's research shared a curious commonality. They all used variations of names that included the elements black, wood, or thorn. Black, blackwood, thornwood, blackthorn, and so on. Whether this represented an actual family lineage or the adoption of a naming convention by practitioners of a shared tradition remains unclear. Chen also noted that the geographical distribution of these practitioners, when mapped across time, formed a distinct pattern, a spiral moving clockwise across the central United States, completing one full revolution approximately every 50 years. The center point of this spiral? Camden County, Missouri. In her thesis, completed in 2019, Chen wrote, "The pattern suggests not random movement, but purposeful progression, as if these practitioners are following a predetermined path, returning to the same locations at regular intervals across generations. The symbolic implications of the spiral pattern are significant in many esoteric traditions, often representing cycles of death and rebirth or the passage between worlds. If we are indeed observing a coherent tradition of practice, moving through time and space in this manner, it raises profound questions about its origins, purpose, and continued existence in modern America." Most startling was Chen's discovery of hospital records from various points along this spiral pattern, showing clusters of twin births similar to those in Camden County, each cluster occurring approximately 33 years apart. The number 33 recurs throughout this pattern, she noted. 33 deaths in the original Blackwood case, 33 years between clusters of twin births, 33 sets of twins in each cluster. The significance of this number appears deliberate, though its meaning remains obscure. Chen's research came to an abrupt end when she accepted a position at a prestigious medical research facility in Switzerland in late 2019. Her departure was unexpected, as she had previously expressed commitment to continuing her research at the University of Missouri. Attempts to contact her by colleagues have been unsuccessful. Her final email, sent to her faculty advisor the day before her departure, contained only a cryptic message: "The spiral turns again. I've been called to follow it." Chen's former roommate later revealed to Dr. Morris that in the weeks before her departure, Chen had been experiencing vivid dreams of a doorway opening and voices calling her through. She had also reported seeing a woman standing at the foot of her bed on multiple nights, a woman matching the description of Martha Blackwood from historical accounts. In 2021, Dr. Morris attempted to locate Chen through conventional channels, contacting the Swiss research facility where she had supposedly taken a position. Their response was troubling. No one named Jessica Chen had ever been employed there. Her trail ended at the airport in St. Louis, where security footage showed her boarding a flight, but not to Switzerland. The destination was Springfield, Missouri, the closest major airport to Camden County. As of 2024, no further academic research on the Blackwood sisters or their potential modern counterparts has been published. The story remains confined to local folklore and occasional mentions in surveys of Ozark supernatural beliefs. Yet strange occurrences continue to be reported around the submerged site of the original Blackwood farmhouse. Park rangers acknowledge an unusually high number of unexplained phenomena in that section of the lake. Electrical equipment malfunctioning, sudden temperature drops, and visitors reporting vivid dreams after swimming in the area. Ranger Thomas Wilkins, who has worked at Lake of the Ozarks State Park for 23 years, confided to a local reporter in 2022, "There's something not right about that cove. We don't talk about it officially, but every ranger knows to be careful there, especially around dusk. Sounds carry differently over that part of the water. Sometimes you hear voices when there's no one around. Children's voices, usually, laughing or calling out names." In 2022, a scuba diving team exploring the lake bottom near the site reported finding the foundation stones of what appeared to be the original farmhouse, despite official records indicating the structure had been demolished before the lake was created. More disturbing was their discovery of what appeared to be a sealed stone chamber beneath the foundation, a chamber they were unable to access due to equipment failure, that forced them to surface prematurely. When they returned the following day with replacement equipment, they could find no trace of either the foundation or the chamber. Lake bed surveys conducted by the Army Corps of Engineers in the following months detected no structures or anomalies in the area. The divers maintained the accuracy of their initial findings, though one member of the team subsequently left the area, reportedly accepting a position with a research facility in Switzerland. The lead diver, Robert Jennings, later confided to Holloway, "What the official report doesn't mention is what we saw inside that chamber through a small opening in the stones. There was a door, not a wooden door, but a rectangle of absolute darkness, standing unsupported in the middle of the chamber. As we watched, a small hand reached through this darkness, a child's hand, pale and translucent. Then another and another, until dozens of tiny hands were reaching out toward us. That's when our equipment failed. To this day, I believe it wasn't coincidence. Something didn't want us there." The most recent chapter in this century-spanning mystery occurred in early 2023, when Camden County Regional Hospital reported the birth of triplets, the first recorded in the county's history. The attending physician was a woman who had joined the staff just 6 months earlier, a Dr. Eleanor Thornwood. According to hospital records, the infants were all in perfect health, though the attending nurse noted that Dr. Thornwood had insisted on being alone with the infants for several minutes immediately after delivery, citing a need to perform standard assessments. The nurse, who requested anonymity when speaking to Holloway, described witnessing something unusual through the partially open door of the examination room. Dr. Thornwood was standing with the 3 babies arranged before her. She wasn't touching them, just looking intently from one to the other. Then she began to speak in a language I've never heard, not Latin or Greek or anything medical. The lights in the room dimmed, and I swear I saw something like a doorway appear behind her, a rectangle of darkness floating in midair. Then she sensed me watching and closed the door completely. When questioned later about what these assessments entailed, Dr. Thornwood reportedly smiled and said only, "Ensuring the doorway is properly balanced." 1 week after the delivery, Dr. Thornwood resigned her position, citing personal reasons. Her current whereabouts are unknown. The hospital administrator, when asked about the unusual circumstances, became visibly uncomfortable and terminated the interview. Later that same day, hospital records related to the triplets' birth were reported missing from the records office. The triplets, now approaching their first birthday, are by all accounts developing normally, perhaps more than normally. Their mother recently told a local reporter that all 3 had begun speaking in full sentences at 6 months, an achievement so extraordinary it defies conventional developmental milestones. When asked if anything unusual had occurred during their birth, she paused before answering, "Only that Dr. Thornwood had me drink a strange tea just before delivery. It tasted of herbs I couldn't identify. She said it would ease the pain, and it did. But afterward, I had the strangest dream of standing in a doorway between 2 worlds, watching something pass from one side to the other. I saw my children on both sides of the threshold, as if they existed in 2 places at once. When I told Dr. Thornwood about the dream, she just nodded and said, 'The doorway stands open. The cycle continues.' Most disturbing of all, the mother reported that all 3 children, despite their advanced verbal development, occasionally speak in unison in what sounds like a different language entirely. When they do this, she said, their eyes look different, older somehow, as if something else is looking out through them. It only lasts a moment, but it terrifies me every time." Recent hospital records show an unusual trend developing throughout the county, an increase in twin pregnancies among women who were present in the maternity ward the day the triplets were born. As of this recording, 7 sets of twins have been reported, with all mothers in their first trimester. James Holloway, now in his 70s, continues to document these occurrences, though he no longer publishes his findings. When asked why by a former colleague, he replied simply, "Some doors are better left closed. Some knowledge is dangerous to share. I've learned that much from the Blackwood legacy." In March 2024, a strange advertisement appeared in the Camden County Gazette Classifieds, midwifery services offered by experienced practitioner, specializing in twin births. Contact E. Blackwood. The paper's editor reported that the ad had appeared in their system without going through normal submission channels. When they attempted to trace the source, they found no record of how it had been placed or by whom. The telephone number listed in the advertisement connects to a voicemail message consisting only of a woman's voice reciting what sounds like a poem or chant. The doorway stands between the worlds. The cycle turns again. 33 returned, 33 received. The balance must be maintained. What are we to make of these accounts spanning more than a century? A series of coincidences and folklore embellished over generations? The misinterpretation of tragic but natural events through the lens of superstition, or evidence of something operating at the fringes of our understanding. A tradition of practitioners working to some purpose we can only glimpse in fragments and echoes. Perhaps it is merely a ghost story, a tale told to explain the harsh realities of infant mortality in an era before modern medicine. Perhaps the statistical anomalies noted by Wilson, Holloway, and Morris are just that, anomalies, random clusters that human minds, seeking pattern and meaning, have connected into a narrative that exists only in imagination. Or perhaps, in the dark corners of our world, doorways do stand open between realms. Perhaps there are those who keep watch over these thresholds, maintaining a balance we can barely comprehend. Perhaps the Blackwood sisters and their apparent successors are guardians of an ancient pact, one that requires terrible sacrifice, but prevents something far worse. The records of births and deaths from Camden County between 1885 and 1888 show a statistical anomaly that has never been adequately explained. 33 infant deaths following seemingly normal births, all attended by the same midwives, followed by decades of remarkable accomplishments by children born to the same families afterward. Coincidence? Superstition? Or something darker that defies rational explanation? The Blackwood sisters took their secrets with them. The water of the lake keeps what remains. Some stories resist conclusion. Some mysteries prefer to stay unsolved. In the end, all we can say with certainty is this. In the autumn of 1886, in the rural outskirts of what would later become Camdenton, Missouri, 2 sisters began delivering babies. Children died. And something changed in Camden County, something subtle but profound that echoes through generations even now. Listen carefully on quiet nights near the lake. Some say you can still hear it, the soft sound of women singing lullabies beneath the water, lullabies for 33 children who were never meant to stay. Or perhaps it's just the wind through the trees carrying echoes of a history we can never fully understand. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.